Ben Bosscher here with you in the Blazy Electric studio atop Dow Diamond. As always, it's a Friday, so let's kick off your weekend on a positive note. Oh, wait, Scott Harris let us all down. You know, I really wish I could sit here and tell you A-plus grade for this Detroit Tigers team at the deadline. I really wish I could tell you what Mets radio is telling their fans or what Phillies radio is telling their fans, basically saying, hey, you got a GM who's all in, who wants to trade prospects and is prioritizing a World Series. Well, that just doesn't seem to be what Scott Harris is doing right now. Look, for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week, I basically repeated the same thing, echoing my stance of I don't understand what Scott Harris is doing. Well, now that the trade deadline has passed and we see all the moves that the Tigers made, 7 different arms get added to this rotation/bullpen. I think I finally understand the vision, Kyle. I understand exactly what Scott Harris was trying to do. I just don't agree with it whatsoever. And I have a hard time rationalizing any fan who agrees with the method that Scott Harris took over the past 24 hours here at the trade deadline. He is taking everything he has and just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. What's going to stick today? All right, we're going to add 7 different arms, 5 different major league arms to this roster. We'll just see what sticks. We'll cross our fingers that 2 of these guys hit. What kind of strategy is that? Would you rather have 7 question marks? Let's call it 5 because 2 of the guys are being sent to AAA. So let's call it 5 total question marks or 1 awesome, guaranteed, great arm like a David Bednar. I don't think it's that hard of a decision to make, right? It doesn't take some super genius that's been involved in baseball and running a baseball team for the last 5 years to understand the right move there to improve your team is probably the guarantee, not the 5 question marks, the 5 different things that you're rolling the dice on. Now, look, Kyle Finnegan's probably going to be a solid addition to this lineup. He's probably your number 2 guy behind Vest right now. They get him over from the Nationals. In a vacuum, that trade is completely fine. But you still passed up on Housley. You still passed up on Bednar. You didn't go target the top guys that were available, and the rest of the GMs across the league laughed at you, right? We've got some quotes from other GMs about the Tigers. We've got some quotes from Scott Harris about this Tigers team and their approach here at the deadline. But essentially, he tells you, we'll get into the specifics of it in a second, he tells you, we didn't want to go all in. That has been what's been made clear to Tigers fans here. They don't believe in this team. And what has become even more clear is that Chris Ilitch's mindset and Scott Harris's mindset, they have morphed now into the same person. Chris Ilitch is cheap when it comes to spending money, right? His number 1 priority is not to win a World Series. It's to profit off of the Detroit Tigers. Well, Scott Harris is now not being cheap with money, but hoarding his prospects. Again, to the point where other GMs across the league are laughing at the Tigers because they picked up the phone, tried to make a deal, and the Tigers just wouldn't play ball. They're way too protective of their top picks. And you look around, let's just look around the American League. The National League, in terms of the Mets and the Phillies, they went nuts in terms of what they were willing to give up. But just the American League, the Red Sox gave up their 5 and 22nd ranked prospect, 5th and 22nd. The Mariners gave up their 9th, 13th, 16th, and 17th prospects. The Yankees gave up their 8th, 14th, 9th, and 21st ranked prospects, and the Blue Jays gave up their 5th ranked prospect. The Tigers gave up their 14th and 15th ranked prospect. They didn't want to play the same game, and they allowed other GMs to bring their franchise a lot closer to this Detroit Tigers team. I simply cannot sit here on this microphone and tell our audience that this is the best team in the American League anymore. I just can't do it. They elected to not get aggressive here at the deadline. They decided to be buyers in the cheapest possible way, giving up no top 10 prospects. Here's some cash considerations. We're going to swing for the fences and roll the dice on some of these deteriorated bullpen arms, right? This guy that they got over from Atlanta, Rafael Montero, their fan base celebrated when he got moved. Oh, we don't have to watch this guy anymore because all he does is walk people. He's one of the highest walk rates in Major League Baseball. They didn't want him on their team anymore. And the Tigers were like, we think Chris Fetter can fix him. Chris Fetter's a great coach. Chris Fetter is one of the best pitching coaches in all of baseball. But you can't keep handing them these fix-me-up, tune-me-up projects and expecting him to turn them into these incredible starters. You had a chance to add incredible starters here in the last 24 hours, and you elected to allow the other teams in the American League, like the Yankees, like the Mariners, like the Red Sox, like the Blue Jays, to acquire all that talent. And meanwhile, you decided, I'd rather keep the prospects, I'd rather hold on to these guys, and we'll think about the future later on. The future doesn't matter when the present is right now and the present is allowing you to win a World Series if you can make the correct corresponding moves in order to get yourself in that position. Tarek Skubal's only here for another year and a half, ladies and gentlemen. At least that's the mindset I have. Scott Harris believes there is no Tarek Skubal window. Oh, that probably means that they're going to re-sign him, right? No, he just believes whether or not they have Tarek Skubal, this is going to be a successful team. Why are you hoarding the prospects? That is the part. I understand why. I just don't agree with it. Why is he hoarding the prospects? Because his entire reputation, Scott Harris's job, depends on Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal. Because if it's not for those two, what does Scott Harris do? I made a list of good moves and bad moves Scott Harris has made in his tenure with the Detroit Tigers. I've only got two good moves. The Gleyber Torres signing, you've got him for another month before he probably signs elsewhere. Another 3 months, really. And the Colt Keith contract. The bad moves consist of the Jack Flaherty contract, $25 million this year, one of the overpaid pitchers in the league. Alex Cobb, $15 million that guy's making, still hasn't pitched a game. Scott Harris should be investigated for fraud when it comes to the Alex Cobb contract. Jack Flaherty trade last year. Waited until the 11th hour, got 80 cents on the dollar for it. And I'm just grouping together the entire 2025 deadline and the last month because you've known this bullpen is bad. You've known who the available guys were to go get. You knew who the best of the best were. And you elected, we're good on that. We're just going to bring in a bunch of misfit toys for Chris Fetter to fix up. Quantity over quality. That was their strategy. That's a strategy I can't get behind. This was a huge L for Scott Harris. Yes, I do think this bullpen got better. The Kyle Finnegan move, look, that's a good addition. So I'm not going to sit here and say every move Scott Harris made was a bad move. But the addition of like a Charlie Morton, that's a free guy that you bring into your rotation who's 41. He's been fine this season. Chris Paddock had a nice performance in his debut as a Tiger as well. So you add two starters, and now Troy Melton has been moved to the bullpen. Regardless, you elected to not go get the top-end talent. You let the Yankees go get Bednar, right? You let the Mariners go get Geno Suarez. I don't think the Tigers didn't get better at the deadline, but the way that they got better was marginal, and it was the cheapest way they possibly could have done it because Chris Ilitch and Scott Harris, they're now the same person. They don't want to give up what they value the most, and what Scott Harris values the most is not winning a World Series. It is building up the farm system, which is way more overrated than I think people realize. It's Max Clark, it's Kevin McGonigal, it's Jose Burseño at the top. The rest of it clearly doesn't seem to be a value of anybody in Major League Baseball, right? That's how he's cheap. We all know how the Ilitch family is cheap. That is not a recipe to win a World Series. I wish I could sit here and celebrate today. I wish I could give it an A+. That's just not where we're at right now. My grade for the deadline. I think it's kind of an arbitrary thing to do. I didn't even prep one, but just it feels like it can't be anything more than a C. Cool. You added a ton of new arms to the bullpen. Are any of these guys actually good? That's going to be the question because you're kind of sitting there crossing your fingers, hoping that one of these misfit toys can give you a couple months of solid pitching. I now understand the strategy that Scott Harris had. It was just a strategy that I simply cannot get behind when you have all these other major league teams that are contending to win a World Series getting aggressive here at the deadline. I read you this quote from the Mariners GM yesterday. There was nothing that was going to get us in the way, or nothing that was going to get in the way of us getting Geno Suarez. I don't know what it's going to take for Scott Harris to have that sort of mindset with any sort of player. Because if it wasn't this year that you were aggressive and trying to add as much talent as possible, then when the hell is that going to happen? The answer is it's probably not. 989-837-6125. This is the Ben Bosscher Show live on 100.9 The Mid. Want to know what you guys